Hey everyone, welcome back to the second episode in this Blending Modes mini course. And in the first episode, we talked a little bit about the luminosity blend mode. And the luminosity blend mode is great for if you're wanting to protect the color saturation in your photos, if you're dimming down the overall exposure or you're adding in some tonal contrast. So in the second episode today, we're going to be talking about the overlay blend mode. And the overlay blend mode is actually categorized into the contrast modes of blend modes. And you guessed it, it incorporates contrast within your base image. So remember we have that base image here and we have our dynamic contrast filter. Well, if we add our dynamic contrast filter, we're adding in detail to our base photo. But let's say we apply that overlay blend mode with our dynamic contrast filter. Now when we apply that detail, we're going to have an intense amount of contrast across our entire photograph because that's how this filter is blending in with our base image. So because the overlay blend mode incorporates contrast within my image, I like to use it to either add in mood or add in a little bit of drama to my foreground or background. So let's go in here to Photo Raw and I'll show you how to use it, and it'll be a lot easier to understand. So now we're inside On1 Photo Raw 2020, and if we take a look at this image here, we can see that it's really washed out, it's really flat, overexposed a little bit, and with it being overexposed, there's not a whole lot of contrast really anywhere in this scene. And a great modifier for photos like this is the overlay blend mode. So without modifying anything inside of our develop tab, I'm just going to hit the backslash key on my keyboard to show that there's nothing going on in the shot. We're just going to head over to our effects tab here. I'm going to add a filter, and I'll add the curves filter. So with this curves filter, I have nothing going on. There's not any modifiers within the toe curve. So if I turn this off and on, there's nothing happening. Well, even if you don't have anything applied within a filter or a local adjustment, if you use a blend mode such as overlay where it incorporates contrast, it's going to add in contrast regardless. So now if I go into my blending options here, and I go to my mode, and I go down to overlay, you can see it immediately incorporates a ton of tonal contrast within the photo, and I haven't even modified my tone curve yet. So it's a really helpful tool, especially in situations like this, because I've added in contrast to the entire photo now. But if I turn this tone curve off and on, take a look at my sky area. By adding in tonal contrast, it's blowing out these highlights up here, and so I'm losing a lot of that sky detail. Well, one way that we can fix that is we can actually apply this tone curve with the overlay blend mode selectively using our masking bug. So with this tone curve here, I'm going to grab my masking bug real quick by hitting M on my keyboard. And so up top here, I'm going to go to my preset here, and I'm going to make sure that linear top is selected. And the reason I want linear top selected is because I can see over here with this thumbnail preview, this is showing me that the white in this mask is applied to the bottom of the image, while the black area is applied up top. So that's going to protect the top area of my scene, which is where the sky area is. So I'll grab my linear top, and then I'll just drop this down kind of on this horizon line here into these mountains. And there we go. I can feather it a little bit. Maybe pull it up some like that. And so now if I turn off this tone curve, it's added in all that contrast to the bottom here, but it's left our sky so that it's nice and vibrant and it doesn't look so dull. So with this tone curve, we could always go in and we could modify it to fit the look of our photo better. So if I wanted to add in more contrast, I could head down into my black point here. I could pull it to the right, and that will bring in more black and more contrast into my scene. Then I could pull up on my shadow tones so that they're not so dark, about there. And then I could pull down on my highlights, and that will incorporate more contrast into this middle area. So now if I turn this off and on, it really looks awesome now with this scene, and I've protected my sky area. So that's one way that you could use the overlay blend mode to selectively apply some contrast into a foreground or background. But let me show you one more way, and it's really, really easy to do. So I'm going to reset everything on this photo, and then I'm going to head over to my layers pane here, and I'm going to make sure that this photo is selected, and then I'm going to click this little button here, and that's going to duplicate that layer. So now with this new layer, I'm going to rename it Contrast, because we're going to be using this contrast layer to incorporate contrast into our scene. So now with this contrast layer selected, I'm going to go down into my blending options here, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to click overlay. So now we're using this top layer to incorporate contrast into our bottom photo. And what we can do is we can click on the masking options for this contrast layer. I can hit M on my keyboard to grab my masking bug, and now I'll just drop this down like we did earlier. And now I've removed it from the sky. And so with this new contrast layer, I can actually go into my Develop tab here, and I can start modifying my tone and color. And I can really liven up the mood and take this really blown out shot and make it come to life.